hello, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. I'm your co-host, Justine Diaz, and of course with me is the wonderful Mr. Randy Davis.
Good evening, everyone. Lovely to see you again, and I'm going to harp on this for the next few shows, I'm sure. I am so thrilled to have you co-hosting this show with me.
Well, thank you so much.
Very excited for that.
Appreciate it. And of course, it's a wonderful honor to be here. I just cannot wait to see what we have going on, all the guests we have coming on, all the topics we're going to talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of information, and maybe some good giggles between the two of us, you know what I mean?
Oh, I'm guessing. Yeah, the bloopers reel, we might have
a little bit.
Do a show just on that.
Absolutely.
But I think we have an excellent guest as our first guest that we are co-hosting together.
Yes, we do.
And I'm going to hold it to you to do the introductions.
Well, I have the honors of welcoming our guest. You may hear this person on the radio. They are out and about in our scene on the street. Also a new board member for the Gilbert Center. Ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, please welcome to our set, Mr. Will Nash.
Yay. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Well,
and it's great to see you both in person, right?
Thank you.
Congratulations on is it first show?
Yeah, this is the first time here with this crew. Second episode. It's a lot of fun so far. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for being here.
It's always great to be here. So thanks but first time being with you guys. So
yeah, it's wonderful to have you on the show, Will. It's something that Deanna and I have talked about for a while, getting you on, and obviously with COVID and all the other production hassles and my schedule, which is crazy, just to be able to actually sit down and tape a show has been challenging for the last little while.
Yes, it has,
for
sure.
To have you as essentially our first in-studio guest since pre-COVID times.
Wow, ooh, big honor.
Is fantastic.
I do feel honored, honestly.
Great to have you here. I know our topic of discussion that I think is something that you have a lot of insight into is essentially the queer participation of folks in the media and sort of what that looks like, not only locally, but on a more broad scale. So maybe before we get going into that specifically, maybe give us a little bit of background about Will Nash.
Where do we start? Right? I mean, for me, like most of my experience, talking in relation to like with the media is like I started out, working in radio. I mean, this is like at a time when I was definitely not out. It was years later. I was a late bloomer in terms of kind of coming out, personally, but then coming out publicly. And I just feel like I've seen so much change. Like at the time when I wasn't out, it's like there was not a lot of out people in media.
No, there was not.
No matter how you defined yourself within the 2S LGBTQ plus community. In fact, I don't even think that acronym as a whole existed back when I was first starting, right? Yeah. And so, I remember starting out early in working in media, working in radio, and thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to come out, or I don't want to necessarily share myself with other people in that way, because what if that stops me from getting a job?
Exactly.
Or what if I have the job and someone finds out and then I lose a job because of that? Which, I mean, fast forward to 2023, we know that is not really permitted. It shouldn't be permitted anywhere, right? And I think for me, it's kind of been like a slow unraveling over the years, where it's in terms of like what I was comfortable sharing. At one point it was actually, although I'd spoken about being in the gay community, identifying as gay way before this, it was during COVID. And for like the last 5 or 6 years before COVID, I always wanted to share my coming out story, right? But it was because there was just so much negativity that we're hearing, and so much news and so much hard stuff. Like all the things that I didn't like about getting into media, like I like pop culture, I like music, I like entertainment, so I wanted to kind of keep it light. And it was like, so I shared my coming out story on air during the pandemic for the station I was working at in Kitchener at the time. And it was just like, it made me so happy to share that story, and then to get, for the most part, positive feedback coming back to me. So yeah, that's kind of like, I've worked in, it feels weird saying it out loud, but I've worked in media in some shape or form. Spent some time here at Rogers, worked in radio in, Durham Region, Kitchener, Barrie. This is my second trip in Barrie. I've worked in Toronto. So, but I've kind of like seen how things have changed, not only within like the media landscape, but especially within our community and how we're presenting ourselves. Because for me, it's so important how you want to be authentic about it in the same way that you both, I'm sure, want to be authentic on this show.
100%.
And, you know, give as much of yourselves to your audience as you can. And I feel the same way. Like, I don't know if that like helps you understand a little bit of background information about me, but you know, that's kind of, I think, a start.
Well, I 100% agree with you there. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit of a Will Nash stan.
I love that.
I listen to Spill the Tea all the time. And it is actually a great little outlet for not just other queer identifying people, but just for the community in general. I think there was a really good topic of conversation that you had on your show the other day about roles in relationships. And now a lot of the topics were with heteronormative couples, but it really does relate to a lot of people in general. And I think the topic was, you know, the expectation of what it's like to be a partner. And, you know, like when one partner isn't kind of pulling their weight, how can they kind of help without having to spend a lot of money and kind of things like kind of ideas like that. And you had some ideas about like, you know, going like having a picnic on the floor or things, you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of things that we need to hear to kind of normalize. And I don't want to say normalize or let other people see that we as queer people, our lives are just the same.
Well,
you know?
And the funny thing is, you're 100% right, just the same. But the funny thing is, with Spill the Tea, thanks for mentioning that and for listening, by the way, it's like often these situations will come up with, you know, heterosexual couples. And then I'll hear from you. Then I'll hear from like my friends who are in the community. They're just like, okay, we would have been dealing with this a lot different than they dealt with this, or you know, he or she is complaining about this, like they haven't seen nothing yet. So when we have, you know, which obviously I try to do as well, and hopefully more of that with, you know, being Pride Month, you know, sharing those experiences and really opening eyes on all sides to like what's happening in both of those communities. But I appreciate that.
No worries.
It's the same, and it's also, you see the differences and you get to kind of understand each other, I think,
100%.
better as well. And it's I love that part of my show, because I get to like it. Although I'm hosting it, it's for everybody else here in the community. It's for, you know, our community. It's for the community as a whole. And some people are like, this can't be true. Like, I mean, like people, this stuff is happening.
But just to have that positive queer representation in media, but also locally within our community, right? Like it's really important for especially young queer people to see that, you know, being a drag queen, being a performer, you know, I'm out there, I see it. When we did Barrie Pride back in 2018, you know, I was performing on the stage, and, you know, I remember this one little one just sitting there, just like enamored, going, oh my God, you're everything, you're everything. And, you know, to be that light, to be that person for somebody, that's what you are for a lot of people in our community. So it's really important for that representation. So thank you so much for everything that you do, because, you know, having you on the radio, even though it may be that little, like, you know, inconspicuous thing, it really does mean a lot to people like me. So thank you.
You're gonna get me emotional like hearing that, because it's so funny. You're taking me back to a story, and I hope it's okay to share this. Like, you're taking me back to a story when, you know, the earlier days when I was, you know, starting to the unraveling, we'll call it, like sharing more of myself, and not even just myself, but just like saying, hey, I'm with you, I stand by you. You know, whether you as someone who's gay or whether it's just anyone who's a member of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. I feel like that's one and the same for me. And I remember my dad being, you know, I was sharing something that I was doing, I think on the radio or on social media, because, you know, luckily we have these platforms, right? And I was like, oh, like, I kind of had questioned, like, this, like, and my parents are so supportive of me, but it's like, I kind of questioned, like, oh, like, is this like weird that I'm doing this to you? Like, just curious to know, because I'm an inquisitive person. Not that I wouldn't do it anyway, but it's just, like, just kind of like trying to get that. So he's like, you know, I kind of like, you know, he gets concerned or scared even still as like a grown ass man. But then it's like, and then I was showing him some of the, you know, because you get these DMs, you get these text messages, you get these phone calls from people in the community, young people, moms, dads saying thank you. And it's like, I don't want to try and humble brag too much, but it's like, it's those emotional sort of outpourings that you're just like, this is why I'm sharing it. Not for myself, but just because, I mean, that's not really a role model that I had. I mean, I'm sure it's probably part of the reason that I had came out later in life as well. So hearing that, like, that to me is just like, it hits my heartstrings.
100%. And now, Randy, you also have kind of a similar situation, because you also came out later in life. So let's talk a little bit about that and that comparison.
I did, yeah. And I don't know how much later in life you necessarily came out. Well, I was 37, 38.
Yeah, I was
when
like,
came out.
I was like 30, 31, somewhere in there,
Okay,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
so I mean, not too far off, really. Still the same decade.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is after being married and
Yep.
2 children, and
Yeah.
and certainly, you know, when I came out, it was after I'd been divorced. A lot of people think that that was the reason behind my divorce. It wasn't. I was a year after that before I realized, wait a minute, I need to start living my authentic self. And not only for my sake, but for my kids. They were much younger than they are now, obviously, at the time, as I'm getting close to 57 years old now.
Numbers don't exist.
Exactly.
Sure, tell that to my left head. Anyway.
Nothing a little paint and spackle can't
Yeah,
fix.
exactly.
That's right. But yeah, that certainly you know, had an impact. And growing up, like you say, I didn't see role models in the media that that gave me any sort of confidence in coming out. The portrayals of queer folks in media were generally, you know, it was the gay character that got killed at the end of the movie, or was the bad guy in the movie.
100%.
Or even just like the punching bag for a joke or one line.
100%.
It was
like
always
stereotype.
It was always the stereotype. It was always the assistant, the florist, the hairdresser, the
Frank from Father the Bride.
exactly.
Right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
That's like the classic
Exactly.
90s,
Exactly.
right?
Oh, this is me, Frank.
I mean, Martin Short's great, but I mean, come on.
Yeah. But see, that's the other thing too. It's like we lived this life for so many years where we were represented by heterosexual identifying people playing these over the top stereotypical roles.
Yeah.
So we, as queer people, as gay people, when we saw this representation in media, we were like, oh no, this is not me. This is not who I want to be.
And that's to your point about, you know, just, you know, not feeling like you fit it. That the whole thing of like not feeling like you fit in, comfortable enough to be able to come out as who you truly were. Because it was like, even as a community, you know, gay, lesbian, you know, trans, however you want to identify yourself within that community, it's like, I was like, okay, maybe I'm feeling certain ways about things, but like I'm not him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, so am I? Like, I don't know, like, or is this just like, you know, or do I like both? But then liking men and almost kind of like, in my mind, as being younger, almost kind of like it validates it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, yeah, sure, I might find Brad Pitt hot, but so is Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah,
Like, and then
exactly.
it's like differentiating, okay, there's a different sort of way. Like, you can look at her and say she's obviously stunning and they're both talented, but like, it's sort of like trying to figure it out yourself, but also being so terrified. At least that's how I felt at the time, which I know might maybe in 2023 kind of even sound funny or look over dramatic about it, but it's like trying to figure that out almost internally. It's like, how am I supposed to figure this out? There's no one guiding the way for me.
Exactly.
And so that's why it happens later to people like kind of from our generation, right?
Yeah, and we didn't have any idea of what a gender spectrum or a sexuality spectrum looked like, right? It was all binary, and that has been something that, you know, I've had to sort of learn as I've progressed, not only in my career, my work at the center, but just in my life in general, and realizing that, you know, it's okay for me to find Jennifer Aniston just as attractive as I do Brad Pitt. Would I want to sleep with Jennifer? Maybe. Brad? Absolutely.
Still.
So,
But again, it's again learning this discovery. Like, sexuality and identity evolves constantly. You know, I've always identified as a gay man, but as my life has progressed, I more identify as like gay veering pansexual. Does that, like, I just like people. Like, I'm more about a person, and I've always been a person who said a person should be with a person for their person and not their gender. You know, you should really have that connection with somebody. There's people who we are attracted to, and that's it. That never changes. But you know what I mean? Like you said, like, you can still be attracted to Jennifer Aniston but want to jump into bed with Brad Pitt.
Absolutely.
Like, it's completely okay. I, again, you know, just loving people and getting to know myself. You know, this is one question or one comment that I had when I had said that I love men. And when I say men, I love all men, cis, trans, whatever. And so somebody said, oh, so you're bisexual then?
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, we're not going to touch that right now.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that later. But you know what I mean? So this is why we need these topics of conversation. We need people like you in the media, positive role models, to be able to kind of portray what our actual existence is all about. You know, we're very fortunate now to live in a day and time where we have other people in higher spots in media like Anderson Cooper and all these people who are very, very predominant queer identifying people who are in media. We have so many very, very predominantly famous actors and actresses who are queer identifying now, which is amazing. So people now are understanding that it is okay to be your true authentic self.
And it's so true, and it's like, it makes me think, you mentioned Anderson Cooper, I also think Andy Cohen.
Yes, the two of them are ridiculous.
Like, just I could watch the two of them for the next 24 hours straight, right? It's like even going back to say even like a Neil Patrick Harris, and I'd say like, for me, I think back to, I remember watching this interview years ago, and we were talking about Oprah before we started filming, but it was an interview with like Oprah and Neil Patrick Harris and his husband. They were talking about the whole idea of having kids, right? And I will often like revisit, you kind of go those things you go back to because it's almost like, those comfort sort of things that you watch. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like I was not out, not married, not in a relationship, but I was like, I see myself in them. Like I see myself, more than I did some of the other, and not to say anything about anyone who has ever, had the guts, the balls, the glory to come out and say who they are. But it's like, I think that like, I just felt like who I was, the vibe that he was presenting, I felt represented within that.
Exactly.
And I love it when you see someone like Anderson Cooper who could go on and, be like one of the best broadcast journalists in the world, but then, has a couple shots on New Year's Eve and we see it come out a little more.
That was something. Actually, I just watched an interview with the two of them recently, and they had retouched on last year's, like the previous year's New Year's. And it was, Andy was kind of doing a couple of these and the thing, you know what I mean? It was, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, again, we have our moments. And Andy was just voicing his opinion because we as queer people, we get stifled a lot. And we finally have enough. And when we have enough, you better watch out because we're just gonna blow and that's it.
Well, and the thing is too, is like I now, like especially with radio, like I love doing stuff with TV, love doing Rogers, anything social media, so many different platforms that we can be on all the time now. Sometimes when I'm on the radio, because I'm in a room by myself, I have to stop myself because you get so comfortable after doing it for so many years. Like, oh, okay, like I'm that comfortable with myself, I'm that comfortable sharing, I'm that comfortable giving. So I think to your point, like that's maybe what's coming out, right? It's like as if we were to go and grab a drink, grab a coffee, and then we're having a conversation about all these things. So, and I think that that's important to do because, there's 3 different representations on this set,
100%,
right?
100%.
And I think that all are important. And there's, I think that at the end of the day, there's someone who will see this and someone who will listen to my show or go to one of your live shows, seeing you perform, or meet you at the Gilbert Center and be like, oh my gosh, like, you know what? I've never really related to that to anyone before, but I relate to you.
Exactly.
And that's important.
Exactly. And again, like we were talking about before, to see people like yourself, to see other predominant people in the in higher parts of media who represent our queer community in a positive light. That is the most important thing. So when we are watching these things, when we're hearing you talk, it again sparks that, oh my God, that's me. I know that person. I can hear that, right? Yeah. But if you want to make yourself feel really uncomfortable, go back a few years in Oprah. And when she was interviewing Robin Williams and Nathan Lane.
Okay.
And Oprah almost forcibly outed Nathan on the show. And Robin actually saw that and jumped in and diverted the topic of conversation to save Nathan.
Oh, wow.
Because they had just done the birdcage at that point, right? So that was a whole different time, right?
Sign of the times, right?
So we've really watched ourselves progress, but now we are in this moment in time where all the media that is portraying is negativity towards the queer community, the trans community, the drag community. And what are your thoughts on how media is playing either a negative or a positive role on shining a light on that?
Specifically with the drag community or just the community as a whole?
Well, like with the negativity towards the trans and drag community, like everything that's going on in the States that's now trickling up here into North America, into Canada.
Well, here's the thing with that, and again, I just can speak from what I know, is like, it makes me so sad to see and hear the kind of the backlash. A lot of time, there's even been some instances recently with like Drag Story Time where there's been protesting against that. Yes. And, certain people or certain groups of people having issues with something that if someone showing up in drag in reading a story to your child or to a group of children, which again is going to be appropriate for the age, and, you know, whether it's at a library or whether it's at a school, is your biggest concern of the day, you got a problem. Because at the end of the day, you know, you spent so much time there talking about, you know, positivity, and like me as someone who is a gay individual who is out, you know, in our city, it's kind of the same sort of a thing that they're able to do, but at a very young age. And I think that there's nothing about, I mean, you know, for the most part, any of those individuals doing something that's intended to be a positive experience and intended to, I think, open minds, open eyes, and open hearts, that could be perceived negatively. Because obviously, you know, any situation where children are involved, I understand the concern with that, but I think to judge, to stereotype someone just based on, you know, essentially like what they're wearing and how they're presenting themselves is extremely, you know, I mean, ignorant. And I was upset to see, as soon as I saw that, you know, we'd recently had an issue in Barrie with that, I was like, okay, so like, what's going on? I'm trying to find, you know, I will say it's hard to get answers. Even somebody who works in media, it's hard to get those. So what happened? Because my thing is like, see that and I want to talk about it. Because I know I have a young audience. I mean, I know I also have moms and dads who are listening as well too. But because to me that's not right, and that's not anything that I would ever want to promote. Would be like that. I do want to talk about it being negative in terms of, you know, how can we turn that around, and how can we like let people know at home who maybe have never been around a gay person, a lesbian person, a trans person, a drag queen, a drag king, and just let them know that, like, listen, like, this should not be your biggest concern, especially if they are in a school or a library setting where, you know, it's not like it's just like one person there with like a group of kids and go at it. It's like there's been a lot of planning with this, and, you know, talking to, you know, whether it's an individual as yourself or another drag queen or drag king, and, you know, it's not an unsafe space. And if it was, it's probably not because of that person doing the performance.
Well, and I think in a lot of these cases too, these parents who raise these concerns are extremely hypocritical. As a parent of children, while they're grown now, you know, if my children were younger and I had the opportunity to take them to a drag story time, as their parent, that is my obligation and my role to protect them. So if I feel taking them to the library to listen to Justine tell a story is perfectly safe, then that's my right to be able to do that. And to have another parent tell me otherwise, I don't understand the reasoning behind that. If you don't want your child to go to a drag story time, fine, don't bring your child to a drag story time.
Case in
if
point.
I do want that, and many parents find it perfectly fine, then I've got every right to be able to do that. And I think that's where there's a disconnect for me in these protesters that, you know, claim to be protecting children. That's not your job. Your job is not to protect my child. That's my child.
And that's exactly
my job,
exactly what I said. I had the honor of sitting down and doing an interview the other day with Barrie Advance, and we were talking about everything that was going on, and there was some things that obviously didn't get printed, which was unfortunate because there were some pretty good points. But one of the points was, you know, we want to talk about, you know, these drag story reads, right? So what happens at these reads is that, you know, you as a parent, you sign your child up to come, or you pay for a ticket to come and see us perform, right? So we aren't going out and like standing on a street corner and bringing you in. We're not going door to door and knocking on your door saying, hey, have you heard the word of drag?
I know.
You know what I mean?
I'm only laughing because like, I would think that would be obvious, but to so many people it's not, right?
But the other point that I made was that, you know, in this whole thing is that you're going out there and you're telling parents what they're doing is wrong. Then what you're doing is you are questioning people's parenting skills, and that is a whole other can of worms that you do not want to open right now.
Can you imagine, you know, being at, I know, a hockey game on a Sunday morning, and all of a sudden, you know, you have one parent who's, you know, telling the other parents on how their kid should, you know, act on the, I mean, I guess it does happen too.
It does, but,
but it doesn't go over very well. And at times, you know, it can be pretty intense, so it's kind of an extension of that too. And it's like, if you want to sign up your young child, you know, for a drag story time, that's totally your business. You know, I mean, what they're going to experience. Ideally, you've done your research. Okay, it sounds like it's obviously like family appropriate. Like you're not taking them to Woody's on a Saturday night in the village.
But this is exactly, it. This is my case in point. The narrative has been put into place to villainify. Is that the word I'm looking for? us as trans people and as drag performers. And let me clarify, I do not identify as trans. So let's just make that clear. I am a cisgendered man who
Queer
dresses
and clear.
queer and clear.
Yeah,
I'm a cisgendered man who is a drag queen, so I do not speak for the trans experience. But this narrative that has been put on us as queer people, as drag queens and trans people, you know, it has been to make us look bad, and they're using children as a ploy to divert the attention away from all these other issues that are going on. We have been reading stories to children for years. We have been performing for eons. Trans people, gay people, queer spectrum everywhere has been here forever, and it is always going to be here. The fact that people have all of a sudden decided that we were the flavor of the month.
I know.
And it's like, oh, these are the people we're going to pick on next. Like, what's next? We're going to pick on redheads with freckles again? Like, what's going on? Like,
well, the funny thing is, I mean, you know, when I think about, I've had some conversations, which was not initiated by me, was initiated by my friends, you know, different groups of people who just identify as straight or, you know, heterosexual. And, you know, because trans and drag are like tied for the #1 trending spot within not even just like the community, but like within the entire community of like the world, it feels like right now, it comes up, and then, you know, people trying to understand who are not in that community, what it means to do drag, what it means to, you know, identify as trans, and not understanding those thoughts and feelings about that. And my whole thing is like, listen, like, I'm not trans, so I can't speak for someone who is trans or who is transitioning or who is thinking about it. But I said at the end of it, because I think certain people, and not to say that everyone feels this way, but certain people, especially like in our community, Barrie, a smaller city, especially compared to some of the larger ones that surround us, have a really hard time understanding, even if like yourself, not identifying as trans, if you were to walk down, you know, Dunlop Street right now, you're gonna get some stares. So they're gonna be like, "Slay." Then you get some. They're gonna be like, "Okay, what are you doing?" 100%. And I think it's like, why do we always have to have this notion of like that we have to fully understand something to accept it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like it's like, why can't, you know, if I tell you that, you know, if I tell somebody that I am gay, if they did not know, it's like, okay, like, great. You know, what makes you happy? If you're, you know, performing somewhere and you're like, you're a drag queen, great, fine. If you know, however, lesbian, trans, whatever, it's like, that's the thing that I struggle with, is like, well, how come like all of a sudden I become like, I'm the encyclopedia of everything LGBT?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, like.
And as always is the case when we are having these sort of conversations.
We need more time.
We need more time.
To do
we
more
sadly
show,
don't have the time. We're going to have you back, though, Will, absolutely,
Yes,
to
we would
continue this conversation.
love to continue.
Before we do say goodbye, though, just let our folks know where they can hear you.
Yeah, I'm on Fresh 93.1 here in Barrie, Simcoe, Muskoka. You can hear it, Spill the Tea, as you are an avid listener.
Yes.
Thank you for that. That happens every Wednesday at 3.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having the time to share your story with us and your experiences. It's been wonderful. Justine, always a pleasure.
Thank you. You as well, Mr. Davis.
That's it for another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. We'll see you again next time.
Bye.
Bye.